welcome guys onto the Equine Science Hub. So the aim of that channel is to be able to provide you with simplified scientific research that's available related to equine subjects. There's a lot of someone told me that going on within the industry, and sometimes it's very difficult to know what's right and what's wrong. So the aim of that channel is to help you, to provide you with some information onto particular issues related to horses. So today we'll be covering the subject of gastric ulcers. So this video will be split into two, mainly because, well, it's going to be a bit long otherwise. So we're going to be talking first about what are ulcers today and what are the clinical signs and the diagnostic tools available to us for gastric ulcers in horses. And in the second video we'll be talking about the different causes and the treatments available to us. So first off, what are ulcers? So equine gastric ulcer syndrome, EGUS, primarily describes ulceration in the terminal esophagus, non-glandular squamous mucosa, glandular mucosa of the stomach and proximal duodenum. So first off, I think we need to remind ourselves a little bit about the actual digestive tract anatomy within the horse. So the horse eats grass, hay, whatever, concentrates. So the food gets into the mouth, gets chewed, covered in saliva, goes down into the esophagus, which is a long tube, enters the stomach, then gets pushed through in the small intestine, which is divided into three sections. So you've got the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum, if I'm saying that right. And it goes into the colon or the large intestine and then goes back out the other way. So about the stomach itself, it's important to actually understand its full anatomy to appreciate the issue of gastric ulcers in horses. So the stomach within the horse is actually quite small compared to the rest of the digestive tract. So in terms of volume, it's only about 10% of the whole digestive tract. And between 8 and 16 litres depending on the size of the horse. So ulcers actually affects the first section of the digestive tract, so mainly the stomach. So the stomach itself is divided into two sections. What could be divided into two sections? So you've got two valves at each end. So you've got the pyloric valve, which is the end one, and then you've got the cardiac sphincter valve, which is the one at the entrance. The cardiac sphincter valve, I mean, both valves have a really strong muscular valve, and it's usually the reason why, for example, we say horses can't vomit, or, you know, if they do, you're basically in real trouble. So the stomach membrane itself is divided into two sections. So you've got a glandular area and a non-glandular area. So the non-glandular area includes the esophageal region and the saccus caecus, and then the glandular area includes the pyloric region and the fundic region. So glandular obviously stands for glands. The pyloric region secretes the hormone gastrin into the bloodstream, and then the fundic region, this is a fundic region, contains Byars cells which will secrete hydrochloric acid, and that process is being activated through the hormone gastrin. There's also the Morgan cells which secrete pepsin, which is an enzyme which is activated by hydrochloric acid. So the production of gastrin itself is not activated because the stomach sees food, but because the wall of the stomach will actually expand as food enters. So why we need to understand that there are two different areas to the stomach is because there are actually two types of ulcers. You've got glandular and non-glandular ones, and you'll see later they have different causes and potentially different ways of tackling them. So any horse can be affected by gastric ulcers. Also, it's been shown that it's much more common in race horses or horses in training or high intensity training. So some studies have shown that up to 90% of horses in training suffer with gastric ulceration. For pleasure horses, numbers are usually about 50%. Also, they greatly vary from one study to the next. So this, it really depends. But even feral horses do have gastric ulcers. 20 to 29% of the feral population, depending whether they're glandular or non-glandular ulcers. So there are many clinical signs to gastric ulcers in horses, but they will usually include inappetence, diarrhea, poor body condition, weight loss, poor performance, colic, and also changes in behavior. So when it comes to changes in behavior, you may have things like your horse gets sensitive when you're tightening the girths, or it's generally more sensitive or is sensitive in the abdomen area. Stereotypical behavior also, like crib biting, wood chewing, store wall kicking, and all sorts. It's actually long been thought that crib biting was a consequence of gastric ulcers, but more recent studies have shown that there's not really any clear link between the two, and certainly one study, for instance, has shown that the treatment and healing of ulcers was not resulting in horses crib biting any less. So, there may be some link there, but, it's still quite unclear. Science at the moment, hasn't really got an answer on the subject. So when it comes to diagnosis, the only way to diagnose ulcer is through endoscopy or gastroscopy. There's no hematological or biochemical markers. Hematologic markers or biochemical markers for gastric ulcers. In other words, there's no blood test for it. So endoscopy is a fairly routine procedure for equine vets, practitioners, researchers. You get a long tube, about 3 meters long usually, through the horse's nostril, down into the esophagus and into the stomach. So there's a small camera on the end, and you can have a clearer idea of what's going on in there and if there's any lesions. Your horse will probably have to be fasted beforehand in order to see obviously the membrane of the stomach more clearly, and it will probably have to be mildly sedated, but there's no real risk associated with it. I say it's a fairly standard thing that gets done, so I don't think you should have to worry about it if you're thinking about having an endoscopy done on your horse. If you're confident with your vet, then it shouldn't be an issue at all. Sometimes, due to maybe the lack of endoscopy being available to you or your horse, and based on the clinical signs, on the history of the horse, a presumed diagnosis will be made. So you basically roll things out. You start treating for ulcers and see within a few weeks whether there is actually improvement within your horse. there's been a real lack of uniformity over the years between practitioners, researchers in terms of grading ulcers. Back in 2015, consensus has actually been proposed for non-glandular ulcers only, because glandular ulcers is still advocated that they should be described as best as possible. But as for non-glandular ulcers, you have a scale has been made, so a grading system has been made. So it goes from 0 to 4. So 0 being there's no lesions at all, and 4 being there's extensive lesions everywhere on the stomach and very deep ulcers. So in case you were wondering, hyperkeratosis is actually a thickening of the skin. Also, it's important to underline the fact that sometimes there's not always a correlation between the clinical signs being expressed and the severity of the ulcers. So your horse may be riddled with grade 4 ulcers, and it's actually not really showing any signs of it, as you may have, your horse may have a tiny ulcers and it's at the end of the word, and it's having massive significant impact on your horse. So this is it for that video today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I shall see you in part 2. Thank you for watching.